Hi everybody, I'm Trish Christ. In this episode of Our Nashville, NECAT and our super crew of teenagers spend some time with the Nashville Symphony. President and CEO Alan Valentine and his team are going to show and tell us all the cool things they do in our community. Are you ready, Alan?
Yes.
Are you ready, super crew?
Yes.
Let's make the show.
It's our Nashville.
It's our Nashville.
It's our Nashville. It's our Nashville.
We all know how to talk about our organization during meetings, but what about the chance encounter of a lifetime? You never know who may share your next elevator, notice your logo on a notebook or a tote bag, and ask what you do. What's the clearest, most persuasive thing you can say in a short elevator ride?
The Nashville Symphony is a vibrant, alive, 21st century organization that is constantly pushing the envelope and looking for new ways to serve our community. And so if you haven't been to the Nashville Symphony, you really owe it to yourself to go check it out, even if you don't think you're a classical music fan, because I bet we can convince you otherwise.
Alan, I'm so happy to have you here, and I can't wait to ask you a bunch of questions about the Nashville Symphony.
Well, it's great to be here, and it's great to see you.
So my first question is a big one. I mean, it's kind of the obvious one to start with. What's the purpose of a symphony?
Well, you know, the symphony's mission is to inspire, educate, and entertain audiences, and we do that through the performance of music, of course, and we're with a focus, of course, on excellence. And we have at the Nashville Symphony a very unique kind of focus for our work, which is really largely centered around the creation, promotion, and preservation of American music. Mm-hmm. And so unlike maybe some of our peers around the country, you know, we sort of feel an obligation to contribute to the brand that is Music City.
Yes.
In our own genre by that focus, and it's gained us a fair amount of attention around the world for our recordings, and so it's a little bit unique on one hand. On the other hand, we're a symphony orchestra that's here to serve the community, and that is our primary focus, and so that's what we do. We make music for Nashville.
I love it. And we're not talking about something that just started in the last few years. There's quite a longevity behind the Nashville Symphony.
Yes.
Tell me, if you would, a little bit about when and how it got started.
Sure. Well, you know, there was an earlier orchestra predecessor to the Nashville Symphony, actually, that started in the 1920s and was hosted over at Vanderbilt. And it unfortunately succumbed to the Great Depression. And in 1946, Walter Sharp, who was married to Hulda Cheek of the Cheek family, came back from the war, and having seen a lot of great cultural institutions in Europe, decided, you know, Nashville needed to have a great symphony orchestra, and he set about the task of founding the Nashville Symphony. And so we played our first concerts in 1946 in War Memorial Auditorium, and it's been quite a ride since.
Absolutely. And from the beginning, the focus was American music?
No, actually the American music focus came a little bit later. You know, I think when the orchestra first started, it was really focused on standard repertoire, you know, your European masters and that kind of thing. And there was always American music in the programming, but I think it was really Kenneth Schermerhorn's legacy that we developed this focus on American music. Kenneth, when he was alive, and music director of the Nashville Symphony, really had a penchant for and an affinity for, in particular, the New England School of Composition. And so, you know, from the beginning of his tenure, he really put that out there. He was a composer himself, and so we really began to think about that and really adopted that as our artistic identity, and it's been really kind of ingrained in the fabric of everything we do.
And his legacy obviously lives on. I was going to ask you to tell me about Kenneth Schermerhorn, for whom the building, the wonderful facility where you perform, is named.
Well, I like to say I'm really lucky because I got his best years. Kenneth and I worked together for 7 years, the last 7 years of his life, and In fact, he was a really interesting guy. He was very demanding of excellence. He had very high standards. But what a lot of people, I think, didn't realize about Kenneth is that he was a really wonderful, warm person, but he was shy. And I think sometimes his shyness was mistaken for aloofness, which is not at all the case. I mean, he was as down to earth and self-effacing and kind of quiet as as you can get. And but he left quite a legacy. He really is, I think, a pivotal figure in the history of the Nashville Symphony, because it was under his watch that the orchestra really became a fully professional, significant orchestra. He raised the standards. He was really part of the effort to bring the orchestra into what you might call a daytime orchestra status. In other words, up to the point of his tenure, the orchestra really functioned as a nighttime orchestra and used a lot of part-time musicians who had other jobs during the day. And all of that really shifted in a big way under his watch. We also began recording for Naxos, our record label, and that started a legacy of recordings, most of which are of American music, although we did do a few things like Beethoven's Missa Solemnis. And then the quality of the orchestra really began to take off under Kenneth's watch, and the music directors we've had since have really carried that legacy forward. Giancarlo Guerrero, our current music director, has done an amazing job of capitalizing on Kenneth's legacy.
My name is Giancarlo Guerrero, and I am the music director of the Nashville Symphony. The first time I heard an orchestra was my first year at the Youth Symphony in Costa Rica. Gerald Brown, who was the founder of the Youth Orchestra in Costa Rica, was conducting the Youth Symphony. But he was wearing his turtleneck, and he was up there. And just the way that he led these young kids, and the way that everybody looked up to him, that stayed with me, and I said, wow, if there's one thing I can tell about that guy, he's doing his hobby for a living. I feel like that every day of my life. I have been so lucky that I found my calling. And because of that, I don't work. I get to make music for a living, and that is perhaps the greatest privilege that could have ever been afforded to a person like me. Programming for a symphony orchestra, for me, it's the most exciting but also most frustrating aspect of the job. Because obviously, I want to program it all. People ask me what is my favorite piece of music. Well, in the end, it's whatever makes it into the programs, because it goes through such an elimination process that by the time that piece makes it to a concert, I promise you that's going to be my favorite piece in the whole world. Learning any piece of music, for me, is the same process in many ways, because you have to learn it from the score. I get the full score of the music, whether it's a piece from 2 days ago or whether it's a piece from 250 years ago. In the end, my job as a conductor is to transmit the wishes of the composer, what they were trying to say through their music. And many times they want to convey emotions, which is normally what we connect with. Yes, the melodies are pretty, but I promise you there's a deeper connection that audiences have to this music that makes it relevant, whether they were written in the 19th century or in the 21st century. The ideas of love and frustrations and hate and disappointment, they've never changed. Any performance has a level of energy. There is that thing that there's an electricity in the air that puts us on the edge of our seats. How many concerts we've finished where we give that last note and there's a moment of complete and utter silence and the audience is taking it all in. The reason why we do our recordings live, which has garnered us 12, 13, 14, 15 Grammys, is because we want the audience participation. We want their energy to put us on the edge of our seats. And what you hear at these recordings is a time capsule of what happened that evening. And the audience can take a great degree of ownership that they made us and lifted us to that level of great and amazing performances.
You mentioned the lovely facility, the Schermerhorn Center. Let's talk a little bit more about that and what makes it special.
There are a lot of things about the hall that I think make it very special. First of all, it's 1,860 seats, and the seat count. I didn't realize the size. Yeah. Yes,
okay.
And the seat count was driven not by a desire to have a specific number of seats, but by the desire to make sure we had really outstanding acoustics. And I can tell you a kind of interesting story. When we had the design team kickoff meeting, which we had, by the way, in the Country Music Hall of Fame's boardroom, where we could look down on the site and see what we were talking about. We had all of the consultants, the architect, the acoustician, the theater planner in the room. And at the end of the briefing, we had a Q&A, and the theater planner raised his hand and he said, "How many seats do you want to have in the hall?" And I said, "Stop right there." And I pointed at the architect and the acoustician and I said, "I want those two guys to design the best possible room acoustically for Nashville and the Nashville Symphony, and then I want you to figure out how many seats you can comfortably fit in it." And he said, "Well, aren't you worried about the economics of that?" And I said, "No. I have enough experience to know that the count will land somewhere between 1,600 and 2,200 seats. And if we make the hall too big, it will drive the acoustical considerations probably outside the parameters that will get a good result."
That makes sense.
So,
There is a wide array of types of entertainment that happen inside the Schermerhorn. And guide me, Alan, I don't know if those are Nashville Symphony produced events.
most of what you see at the Schermerhorn is actually produced or promoted and presented by the Nashville Symphony.
Okay.
So, you know, whether it's an event like the Lyle Lovett Songwriters Tour that we've had in the hall that doesn't utilize the orchestra. So, you know, we do a wide array of programming, and that became especially heightened, of course, in the last few years as we really sought to, you know, determine how we can make the hall self-sustaining as an asset to support the orchestra. And we've really achieved that, which has, you know, been a long journey.
You've done some
But,
really creative things with movies and the symphony playing along, or maybe not along, maybe it's the only audio that one hears is the live symphony playing the music from our favorite movies of the last.
Right. Well, that's a phenomenon that really kind of started with the guys that do live from Lincoln Center. And John Goberman, I think, did the first one. He took The Wizard of Oz and stripped the music out, but left, you know, Judy Garland's, all the voices are there, and created a process by which the orchestra could play the film score live. And that was the first film we did in the Schermerhorn. And you know, at first it was interesting because at first, you know, it's an incredible experience, but at first people behaved like moviegoers. And so they bought the tickets really late. They really didn't want to pay more than movie prices for the tickets because it was, you know, well, I'm going to see a movie, right?
And I've already seen this movie.
Right, exactly. But once people got in there and really began to understand how powerful it was to have a full symphony orchestra sitting on the stage under the screen, performing in sync the soundtrack live, it really changed everything. And now those movies are among the most popular things we do. And there's a growing body of work now that allows us to do that on a regular basis. So I'm sure that is something that's going to be around as one of the offerings of the symphony for a very long time.
It's clever. And when you're competing with iPods and music and video games, and I don't know if young people listen to radio anymore, I still listen to radio, but how does the Nashville Symphony grow future classical music fans?
We, of course, have a lot of programs available to young people. We have a program starting in the college level. We do a program called Soundcheck, where college students are able to buy less expensive tickets and often in good seats. We have, I'm not sure how much of this is still intact in the way we started it originally, but we do a program that affords inexpensive or free tickets to high school students and chaperones or teachers or parents. And so that operates in the classical series. We have programming, of course, that reaches all kinds of age demographics. We've done a number of video games concerts, for example. And
how does that work?
Oh, it's really phenomenal. You know, the orchestra plays the music of the video games, and we have video on the screens. And I remember one of the first ones we did. My wife and I went down and slid into 2 seats in a box, and there was a young couple in front of us who were probably, you know, 18, 19 years old, and you know, they were sitting there all dressed to the nines and very excited, and they looked at us kind of like, "Wow, what are y'all doing here?" And, you know, but it was, I just had to see this, and it was quite an extraordinary event. We also have an incredible education program, of course, and it really is another thing that's at the core of our mission.
My name is Walter Bittner, and I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement for the Nashville Symphony. We have about 24 programs. They range from our musicians going into schools and sitting with students in their rehearsals and teaching sectional classes to young musicians, performing in schools as chamber ensembles, taking the entire orchestra out into the school system and performing at schools. Our staff and volunteers provide instrument petting zoos to children in early childhood situations through elementary schools. We have a number of special community events that happen each calendar year here at the Nashville Symphony, including our Free Day of Music, our Let Freedom Sing celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy happens every year here. We have an annual choral festival in which youth choirs from around the community come and spend a day working with our musicians and our choral director and perform in the hall. There are many, many ways in which the Nashville Symphony is engaged and embedded in our community beyond just performing excellent music in our own concert hall. Our musicians teach sectional rehearsals for adults as well as children. For instance, for the Nashville Philharmonic Orchestra, which is our community amateur orchestra made up of citizens who have other professional activities, and our musicians go and coach them in preparation for their concerts every year. We also have a free chamber music series that our musicians curate and program themselves and perform here in the hall. It happens 5 or 6 times a year. Music is an essential human activity. From ancient times, it's been something that people have practiced as a means of communication, as a means of entertainment, as a means of expressing and understanding their place in the world. There are aspects to being human that language cannot express, and that's why we have music. Accelerando is a musical term that means to speed things up, and this program was launched in 2015, and our first class began in 2016 to promote opportunities for students from underrepresented ethnicities in the field of classical music.
I'm Julia Arguindey, and I'm the principal bassoonist of the Nashville Symphony. I work with the Accelerando program here. I'm one of the faculty members. That program exists for minorities, so underrepresented musicians ethnically. This is an educational program for the kids, but for me this is much more of an educational program for the business, for the music field, to show them those kids have the same ambitions, the same dreams than all of us, and they should be represented because we are in a society that is completely multicultural. My job right now with them is to make sure that they have the level that as high as possible, that they will have the net for later, and the names of the people who will help, and psychologically that they will be ready. I think we're doing a very good job with these extremely talented young people. They're already progressing and learning, and they have each other, and that's what I love about that program. Since I'm 18 years old, I have been touring the world, so I played in several countries, probably 15 of them. The main difference between those places is the audience. The audience here is absolutely great and very passionate. They are not shy at all about showing their enthusiasm. It's just the amount of love that we receive every night, and the cheering and the respect that we get too, because it's a music city. So we're not the only musicians here, and when we go outside in the streets and we meet people, there is a great respect that is shown, and we see that when they scream and clap and ask for more. So that's really what I like about playing here. It's very interactive.
what could someone watching us chat right now who is inspired to further the endeavors of the Nashville Symphony, what should they do? How can they help?
Well, you know, there are a lot of ways to get involved at the Symphony, and one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is when you walk in to hear a concert, you'll see people wearing these sort of white and green name badges, and those are volunteers. And we have 200 plus volunteers
Wow.
who are trained and who work day in and day out with us down at the Schermerhorn, doing everything from staffing the reception desk to helping stuff envelopes to ushering at children's concerts. And the list just goes on and on and on. And they are committed people who really treat their volunteer service at the Symphony almost like a job. And if you asked any of them, you know, why they do it, it's really evident that it's completely out of a sheer love of the art form and a sheer love of the institution. And they're all part of our family. It's like a big family down there. And so volunteering, of course, is one of the many ways. Volunteer opportunities don't just stop with, you know, stuffing envelopes and working at the reception desk. Our board of directors, of course, is all volunteer. The associate board and the Crescendo Club I mentioned earlier are good opportunities for younger people who are interested in getting involved. And then, of course, just coming to concerts, you know, come and support the Symphony. It doesn't take money to do that. We have all kinds of opportunities to get discounted tickets. I mean, if you follow Mrs. Cheap, you know, in the Tennessean, you know that there are lots of free concerts the Symphony performs throughout our community each year. And we move the orchestra around, by the way. It's not all necessarily in the Schermerhorn. You know, we have a series of community concerts that are free to the community, and for those, we tend to go out into the community and perform at different locations so that we're in neighborhoods and, you know, where people live. So, you know, we might perform a concert in Centennial Park and another in Antioch and another in North Nashville. And so every summer we do that and kind of do a little tour of around our city. And so there are free opportunities also at the Schermerhorn, like the free day of music and so on. So lots of ways to get involved and support the Symphony.
There is sometimes a perception that ballet, classical music, and Shakespeare,
Right.
as a specific theater person, that it's fancy stuff, that it's elite and beyond my reach, and I can't wear this sweater and these boots to go to the Symphony. It's not me. I don't fit in there. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that those are all actually misperceptions. And first of all, if you want to come down to the Symphony, come as you are. And I'm dead serious about that. If you look around the room, you will find all manner of dress. You know, some people prefer to wear a coat and tie, but other people wear blue jeans, and it's all fine, and nobody thinks twice about that. So how you dress is, you know, how you feel comfortable. The great thing about music is that it is accessible to everyone. You don't have to know anything about classical music to appreciate it. You don't have to know anything at all. All you have to do is have a pair of ears and an open mind. And, you know, we live in a society where everybody's focused, you know, doing this and focused on, you know, these short span of attention kind of sound bites. And I think the orchestra provides a really nice point of relief from that constant pressure. We're constantly being bombarded by things. And it's an opportunity for people to go and enjoy an art form that causes introspection and causes people to be quiet and still. And it provides a break in the cadence of our lives that is really badly needed now more than ever. What people might be surprised to learn is that our core audience for the orchestra is not, you know, wealthy corporate CEOs or people who invest money and, the wealthy, for example, or the fancy.
Yes.
But it's really everyday citizens. It's school teachers and firefighters and lawyers and doctors and college professors and
TV girls.
You name it, yeah. And so our core audience really is surprisingly more diverse than I think most people would perceive. And I think probably the thing that gets us, that makes people believe that and develop that misperception is that it takes a lot of money to make this art form work. And we have a lot of very generous people in our community. It's one of the most generous communities in which I've ever worked. It's a community that has no idea what it can't accomplish. And because we're supported by people very generously who have the means to do that, I think they sometimes, you know, others will equate that with, oh, well, that's not for me. But in fact, if you ask those people who are supporting us why they do it, it's as a gift to this community.
Nice.
So that we can have these incredible art forms.
Okay, here we are, Alan. It's my favorite part of the entire interview process. It's the speed round.
Okay.
Just like the game we used to play when we were kids, I'll ask you a question, and literally the first answer that comes to mind, please let it fly, and we'll go on to the next one. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Speed round with Alan Valentine. Name 3 core instruments in a classical orchestra.
Violin, cello, and bass.
Name 3 lesser used, more specialty instruments in a classical orchestra.
The Ons Martineau,
Woo!
Messiaen's Triangulalis coming up. Let's see. The guitar
Okay.
gets used.
Yes.
Mandolin.
And mandolin. I love mandolin. What's the difference in a first violin and a second violin?
Oh, well, really, the difference is in what's written for the instrument. You know, there are different parts in most symphony performances for first violin and second violin. So they kind of split up duties, and they play different lines usually. And so they're both important, but they just are simply playing different parts.
What musical piece have you never done with Nashville Symphony that you would love to do?
In my time, the Janacek Sinfonietta.
And why?
It's just a really wonderful piece, big, huge orchestra. I mean, it's just a great piece of music.
What musical piece have you done that you would like to revisit in performance?
Oh, we could do the Mahler Second every year, and I would be thrilled. The Resurrection, it's a great work, and I think Mahler is the pinnacle of achievement in standard repertoire.
What was the first piece of music performed in the Schermerhorn?
The first piece of music performed in the Schermerhorn was Joan Tower's Made in America.
And my friend, a very difficult question, what is your website?
Our website is www.nashvillesymphony.org.
Ellen, thank you so very much.
You.